Hey everyone, Ryan Young, KAATARO Jiu-Jitsu. I hope you're doing well. So those of you who've been watching our videos for the last few years here on YouTube, and those of you who are members of ours and friends of ours, lightning, you kind of see, or you figured out what we're about here at KAATARO Jiu-Jitsu. We're all about the old school, complete Gracie Jiu-Jitsu that is geared for self-defense, which can be used for a sportive aspect, but is not designed for a sportive aspect. Grandmaster Reylson Gracie, or spelled Reylson, Reylson, he is the fourth son of Carlos Gracie Sr. So he is as old school as they come. And he posted on his Facebook page, and I've spoken to him, probably about a year ago on 2 or 3 occasions for at least an hour each time. What happens is he is the father of Rodrigo Gracie, MMA fighter, right? And he's also the grandmaster to Kenny Gabrielson. Now, Kenny Gabrielson, Master Kenny Gabrielson, is one of the Dirty Dozen members. I think he's number 2 on the list. He was out of California, one of the original garage guys, moved to Orange County, or lived in Orange County, and then ended up training under Grandmaster Reylson. Another famous black belt, at least famous on the West Coast, is Joe Moreira, who's also a black belt under Grandmaster Reylson. He's been a very outspoken critic of today's jiu-jitsu, as has Grandmaster Rickson, which is why Grandmaster Rickson created the JJGF. But, you know, I've always known this about Grandmaster Reylson Gracie, but I've never said anything publicly because I didn't know if he wanted to keep the conversation between us. But since he went and posted this on his Facebook page, I thought I'd kind of read it to you. It's very interesting. Posted 2 days ago. The state of jiu-jitsu. Many say that the mutilated jiu-jitsu, i.e. the sportive, BJJ, etc., without citing names or brands, at least for now, which is dominating the market, saves lives and gives employment to many people. However, this mutilation, these are his words, has a very high price that nearly nobody talks about. Jiu-Jitsu, in its mutilated version, possesses less than 20% of the original capacity and efficiency of the true and complete martial Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This makes the aforementioned mutilation of the art fatal for the practitioner in the battlefield, where the other 80% plus of techniques would be strictly necessary to guarantee their survival. So what he's saying is that today's jiu-jitsu, the sport jiu-jitsu, or BJJ as I even call it, is not really the complete martial art in his opinion. And this is what he's saying. So the philosophy that many say to be good even when propagated in the academies of those who mutilate the art, sometimes they profess my father's very own philosophy. Remember, he is Carlos Gracie Sr.'s 4th son. Not Elio Gracie's son, Carlos Gracie Sr.'s 4th son. Suffers from an immense flaw when attached to a false and mutilated jiu-jitsu. All the beautiful things that they say end up being empty words and ideals, for they profess an apparently honest truth to the mind, but teach a dishonest lie to the body. So he's saying is what they do is they tell you one thing, but they show you something else. The mind should be attuned to the body. If the mind is moved by such great ideals, the body should receive the same courtesy in the form of adequate discipline and content. And if that is denied, the master or instructor commits the greatest or the biggest fraud of all with their student's soul, which is to give courage, confidence, and even hope to the soul, but deny the tools needed for the student's body to be able to justify such noble attributes. And with this, the student thinks himself invincible when in reality he is nothing of the sort. So what he's saying is that BJJ instructors of today who don't know the entire art that he says Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is, they're not teaching their students the entire art, and at the same time they're telling them, yes, this is self-defense, and you know, and what he's saying is it's leading these students to believe they know self-defense when they get into a situation they find out rudely that they don't know self-defense. This is something that Grandmaster Rickson has been saying for a while. This is something that Horian Gracie, Elio Gracie, Reylson Gracie have all been saying as well. And being that Master Dave and Jack Toffer and Professor Fernando and myself, we come from that line. You know, we've all trained directly under Elio's sons at some point in our times. This is what we believe, because this is what we were led to believe, and this is what we were also taught to believe as well. And as far as our jiu-jitsu, this is what we learned. He continues, the practitioner of the mutilated jiu-jitsu, as soon as he sees himself in a real combat situation, will have concrete proof of what I am saying. Jiu-jitsu in its complete form should include defensive and offensive maneuvers for every type of situation, and its mutilated version clearly lacks that. Furthermore, the mutilated jiu-jitsu, the part of on-foot maneuvers is almost or completely extinct without a solid base in this area. You will never be prepared to fight against someone in real combat. I want to see you do a scratch and roll on the asphalt. See, this is what he's saying. So what he's saying is that there's no self-defense that you do initiated on the feet. There's no clinch. There's no headlock escapes. There's no way to take anybody down. You know, it's all. If any takedowns are done, they're more folk style wrestling or freestyle wrestling, which takes a long time to learn how to do as well. The good appearance of the social impact of the mutilated jiu-jitsu makes it so that people ignore this reality and rush to defend this mutilated version. But think about it. If someone says they are teaching a martial art, meaning an art of war, their students should be equipped to defend themselves and to know how to attack if necessary, right? This is the point. If you, by one hand, say that you save lives, by another, you destroy lives every time a student is ill-prepared for combat, and you also contribute to the extinction of a military art for not having the capacity and the discipline to teach it in its complete form and for its true purpose. So what he's saying is that he's accusing these instructors of creating delusion among their students, giving them false hope and false belief. At the same time, they're contributing to the demise of the art by not teaching the whole art. The other point I want to make is that many think it's necessary to know the mutilated jiu-jitsu, sport of BJJ, etc., for competitions, and think also that because of this, the correct thing to do is to divide jiu-jitsu into martial jiu-jitsu and sport of jiu-jitsu and say that both have their reasons for existing. The first problem with this is that when you disseminate the mutilated jiu-jitsu, which can be taught more quickly and more easily, for it is much less lethal, has much less content, and is more famous in the market due to competitions, you throw the true martial jiu-jitsu into the abyss. A jiu-jitsu in which you can optimize much better the lethality according to the situation. The second problem is that it is a myth that you should or need to learn the mutilated sport of jiu-jitsu to compete, because martial jiu-jitsu practitioners have hundreds of times more knowledge and is much more capable of winning any competition, be it no holds barred or sportive. It is for this reason that you are forced to enter a federation, group, or confederation to partake in the majority of these competitions, and these entities almost always accept mediocre students who only know mutilated jiu-jitsu, who are trained by instructors and masters, he put that in quotes, that only know the mutilated jiu-jitsu, which are associated to other mutilators of the art. My students, he's saying, this is now him saying, my students cannot compete through these federations and confederations, and they shouldn't for the same motive. And I refuse to sell myself to this dishonest scheme of theirs, who force their students to be stuck for 5 years in one belt, due in part to the inefficient learning system of student with nearly no direct contact with the instructor. So I guess we talk about this where you have academies that are solely run by blue belts and purple belts. They just have a black belt come in every once in a while, with nearly no direct contact with the instructor, and also due to the enormous groups of students being taught per hour, among other things, so that they grow old, lose their physical attributes, being unable to compete, and are forced to become mediocre instructors, hostages of this same exclusive circle of people. And this generates a vicious cycle of mutilation where only this so-called sportive is accepted and disseminated to generate money, fooling everyone that participates in the competitions. It is for these reasons, too, that any man nowadays can, through his fraudulent manner, call himself a master. You know, I try not to talk too much about this because it's not really my battle, but I do see it around where you do have instructors who really don't know a lot of the art. You know, I've mentioned in past videos about going to a Hicks and Gracie seminar where a black belt who was next to my white belts didn't know a headlock escape from the ground, and then asked me if I could help him, which I gladly did, but said, let's step back and let me go to a Kesa escape with the punches. Going a step further back, he didn't even know how to escape Kesa. You know, that basic escape that we did, you know, the old Gracie, get to your side, frame, shrimp back, put your leg over, and you can either squeeze his head or you can get up on top of him. He didn't even know that. So I had to go and teach him that before I could even teach him the concept that Hickson was trying to teach in the seminar. But yet he's a black belt teaching, right? The solution for this, although I'm not much in favor of the use of this art for competitions, the solution for this is to always teach everyone the martial jiu-jitsu in its essential and complete form. And if students who pass through the whole rigorous training to better themselves in mind and body opted to compete, they should compete. And after that, teach using the martial art in its true form, because in this way, its extinction would be avoided. It is not necessary to teach or practice the mutilated jiu-jitsu. As with the competitions, the social actions can be done in the same way with the true martial jiu-jitsu and will be much more gratifying for everyone in this manner. So he's saying that you don't need to know a sport jiu-jitsu and a traditional jiu-jitsu. Just learn the traditional jiu-jitsu and then go and compete. And this is something that I've been trying to say as well. We're not a big competitive school, but when we do compete, the few times that we do compete, our guys do well, right? And they don't even know how to score points. And I've mentioned this before as well. So let me continue on. But for this to happen, it is necessary for the public to reject this mutilated jiu-jitsu. Many of the people who are fooled for a small amount of time can easily disavow it. But it is a challenge for those who already lost 10 or more years in a lie. In such cases, it will be very difficult for them to admit the truth. For the ones that value more the art and a clean conscience rather than pure financial gain, I ask that you make an effort to know the jiu-jitsu you learned was the mutilated version, sportive BJJ. And if this is the case, that you try to find a source, like myself, he's pitching himself, that can teach you the true martial jiu-jitsu. The majority of the people may say that because such and such a person learned with people linked to other members of my family, the Gracie family, or even with other members of my family themselves, or some other source that they admire, they did not have any chance of having been submitted to the dishonest disciplinary regime of the mutilated jiu-jitsu, but this is far from the truth. Nearly all sources, including many family members, Gracie family members, and those linked to them are corrupted and mutilated. And mutilation is what occurs when there is discriminate mass proliferation of the art without any parameter of quality control. Since the public didn't know the art, how could they differentiate between its true complete form and a mutilated form? The public trusted the brands that disseminated the art without questioning, and this was the result. With what I say here, I give to some many parameters to better discern what is a true martial jiu-jitsu. This mutilation also happened with all other martial arts in different degrees and intensity, and is a generalized problem. Something that says a lot about the dishonesty of many masters and instructors that teach them. If every one of them were honest and said that they would only teach 20% of the art, they would have almost no students, and their potential students would seek another master who knew the art integrally. To summarize, reject the mutilation of the martial jiu-jitsu and its division into modalities. The art is to be only one. Either you teach, practice it correctly and in its complete form, or you don't. In case it is not practiced correctly, it is then called mutilated, and the one that is practiced correctly is called martial. But this is done purely for differentiation purposes due to the chaotic place in which jiu-jitsu encounters itself, with the facade that says self-defense or martial art. But in the overwhelmingly majority of cases, there is nothing martial or self-defense about the establishment. Search for truthful sources. I will do a tutorial for this and soon, anyhow, I still teach, and demand retraction and admission of guilt from your instructors and masters if you have reasons to believe that you were submitted to the mutilated and its philosophical fraud. Thank you for reading. Reylson, Gracie. Anyway, so that was a pretty interesting read. Like I said, I've spoken to him for a couple of hours prior. He's a very, very opinionated gentleman. And like I said, he was my former instructor, Kenny Gabrielson. After I left Hickson, I went to Kenny Gabrielson School for a little while, and he was Kenny's grandmaster. And I see where he's going, and I believe the same thing. I don't know things as much as he does. I mean, he gave me stats on how many schools are in Brazil, how many schools in the U.S., how many schools are outside of Brazil in the U.S., and he's worked hard. He's got a big database of schools. And that's how he reached me as well. I don't think he had gotten to me through Kenny. He just reached out to me, and he knew who I was and everything. Anyway, he does want to preserve the martial aspect of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which is what we want. But we've seen the differences as well. It's just that, as you can tell, there's probably going to be a lot of negative feedback on this video, which it's fine, but it'll show how it's exactly what he's saying, how people, they have all this time involved in BJJ, and then if you point out to them that, well, you don't know this and this and this and this, and they then get defensive. And it doesn't help when you have another master, one of his brothers, on video saying that it's all jiu-jitsu and the sport of jiu-jitsu is merely the advanced version of jiu-jitsu. But in reality, you know, just when we're practicing in our class, you know, we practice with slaps a lot. And it's amazing how when you show somebody a concept and they do it flawlessly, and then you just add some taps to the head, how everything just goes out the window. Everything, literally. It's almost like they forgot everything they learned. And you know, then once they get to that point where they realize, okay, I'm not going to be getting beat up by getting hit in the head like this. Then they get to the point where they calm down and they go through the techniques like they're supposed to. Well, you then turn it up a little bit and hit them a little harder, and guess what? It all falls out again. So I completely agree with what he's saying about the martial aspects of jiu-jitsu and it being totally deleted. And you know, I've taught enough students who have been advanced belts, who have come in, you know, for a private or whatever, and I start off by warming up with gloves on, and I'm just telling them, you know, parry, close the distance, parry, close the distance, you know, get to a clinch, you know, they cannot do it because they've never learned it. They always start by fist bumping and sitting on their butt, and that's how they start. I thought I'd just kind of share this with you to show that I'm glad I'm not alone here. I'm glad, you know, we at Kama Jiu-Jitsu are not alone here, and you know, we're doing our part. You know, we're trying to get the martial aspect of jiu-jitsu out there again, because although the sports stuff is good, I think it's just become a little too much. Whereas, you know, you get people who come to us and they realize, wait a minute, this is all different now, especially parents of kids. And I asked them, I go, why did you enroll in jiu-jitsu in the first place? They said, because I wanted my son to learn how to defend himself. And, you know, just a simple drill in our class shows that that child does not know how to defend himself, even from something basic. So anyway, I thought this was interesting. If you're friends with him, you might have seen this already, Facebook friends with him. If not, go ahead and link up with him and, you know, you'll see more. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Take care. Happy training. Bye-bye now.